Ho, 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 ho! Merry Christmas, everyone. Welcome to Santa's Workshop. Today, me and Santa's little helpers, my little elves here, will be reviewing and ranking every movie in the Silent Night, Deadly Night series. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Excluding the 2012 loose remake, which looks sort of shitty, doesn't it? It looks like it sucks reindeer balls, so we will be skipping that one. Santa forgot to grow out his beard this year, so he's using CGI. We hate CGI, don't we? Yes, we do. So gather around the fire, grab a hot chocolate as we count down every shitty movie in this franchise, and they are shitty, aren't they? Merry Christmas, everyone! Ladies and gentlemen, what is going on? Merry Christmas, welcome back. My name is Justin, this is Pete, and today we are going to be reviewing and counting down every movie in the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise. That's right, Pete, that's right. I hope everybody's having a good Christmas. It is Christmas Day, we're about to enter a new year, all kinds of fun shit coming in the next year, so to all my subscribers, thank you guys so much. You have anything to add to that? Okay. This truly is one of the most bizarre horror franchises. You wanna go lay in your bed? Here you go, Pete, you can lay in your bed. The Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise truly is one of the most bizarre, disconnected, odd, strange, cult franchises in horror history. The movies are all over the place. Some are connected, some are not. Some are about Christmas, some are not. And be sure to stay tuned at the end of the video where I'll be ranking every movie in the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise. Pete's gonna hang around here. He's Santa's little helper in his little PJs. He usually ends up getting bored and hopping down about halfway through the video, so, but he did want to say hi. So guys, let's just jump right into it and start reviewing and ranking every movie in the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise. Let's do it. The first entry in the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise was released in 1984. It was actually a pretty controversial movie when it came out due to its depiction of an evil killer Santa, which is a little odd in my opinion, being that this movie came after Christmas Evil, which is a very sinister movie in tone. But either way, large crowds of protesters and Santa fans showed up around the nation to protest at screenings and at malls, all because of the depiction of an evil killer Santa Claus, including a particularly nasty protest at the film's East Coast premiere at the Interborough Quad Theater, where people picketed and sang Christmas carols, all to protest an evil depiction of their beloved Santa Claus. It actually kind of worked. TriStar eventually pulled ads for the film 6 days after the film's initial release on November 15th, 1984. The film would actually then be pulled from theaters shortly after, which to me is just ridiculous. Santa's not a religious figure. He's a fictional character designed to sell presents and toys. Uptight 80s critics Siskel and Ebert and even Leonard Maltin gave scathing reviews to this movie.
You people have nothing to be proud of, even if you made a few bucks off of all the negative publicity. Your profits truly are blood money. Silent Night, Deadly Night now has the distinction of joining I Spit on Your Grave as one of the two most contemptible films I have seen.
I would like to hear them explain to their children and their grandchildren that it's only a movie.
Yeah.
I think that would be a real interesting explanation.
Now, although I don't find this movie to be as controversial as all the uproar would have led people to believe, this movie does have a fairly sinister tone and some pretty disturbing moments, usually involving children. I think that's why this movie seems to be so, disturbing in nature. Santa's supposed to give you presents, not put a screwdriver through your head. I guess we could talk a little bit about what Silent Night, Deadly Night's about. Little Billy witnesses his parents getting killed by Santa after being warned by his senile grandpa that Santa punishes those who are naughty. Naughty, punish. All right, calm down, Justin. Now Billy is 18 and out of the orphanage, and he has just become Santa himself. A killer Santa, that is. The movie opens up with little Billy and his parents as they drive to go visit Grandpa on Christmas Eve. Supposedly, Grandpa hasn't said a word. He's in some sort of weird vegetative state where he just stares into space, but when his parents leave the room, he decides to lean over to Billy and speak for the first time in however long and explain how evil Santa actually is, and if you are naughty, Santa will actually come and harm you and punish you. That really sticks with him, and that really messes with Billy.
All the naughty ones, he punishes.
Grandpa's words ring even more true when on the way home, the family vehicle is stopped when they see poor Santa broke down on the side of the road. Obviously, we know this isn't Santa. He had just held up a gas station and shot this poor clerk in the head for $30. And he then proceeds to kill both of Billy's parents violently and horrifically, assaulting his mother right in front of his eyes. This completely traumatizes Billy. And then he goes on to live in an orphanage with his little brother Ricky, who will come into play later in the series.
Garbage Day!
And then he's further subjected to torture with the awful Mother Superior. She is just terrible.
Very, very naughty.
Little Billy can't catch a break, and he's basically fucked for his whole life. We cut back to him at 18 years old, and he's working at a department store. Everything seems to be going good until Christmas Eve when they have him dress up as Santa, and he seemingly loses his damn mind and killing everybody who he deems as naughty. Honestly, this movie is a lot of fun. I had a blast watching this movie. I watched it last year, I watched it this year. The performances are great. It's surprisingly well shot. The score is fantastic. I love the music in this movie, and there's actually some pretty decent kills. As I was rewatching this last night, I did notice that this movie is fairly disturbing in its subject matter. Like I said in the beginning, a lot of this movie involves childhood trauma, children witnessing horrible things, including, in the orphanage when they witness multiple people get shot and they're sprayed with blood. It's really kind of fucked up. But we have some great kills in this movie. We have the hammer kill in the toy store. We have the deer kill with the always topless Linnea Quigley. We have this amazing decapitation kill when the dude is on the sled and the headless bodies sledding toward the camera. It's such a cool scene. The Christmas light kill, which is also in the department store, which is another great kill. But this movie is a lot of fun, even with its sinister vibes and sort of the childhood trauma aspect, which is fairly disturbing. This movie is a lot of fun. It has a lot of Christmas feel to it. This is probably the most well-made movie in the series. Like I said, the score is awesome. The performances are actually pretty decent. The performance of Billy by Robert Brian Wilson is great. He's a little stiff in the movie, but it just works for everything that the movie is. This movie was directed by Charles E. Sellier, who was primarily a producer, a pretty prolific producer, specifically the Grizzly Adams movies and these outdoor sort of frontier movies of the 70s. He produced about 70 or 80 movies. He only directed 4 feature films. This was one of them. Speaking of Billy, the actor Robert Brian Wilson, he really only did a handful of projects, a lot of one-off TV episodes, just a couple movies, and he took a really long extended break from acting for over 20 years until 2016 when he made an appearance in a couple of Christmas films directed by David DeCoteau, the one and only David DeCoteau, Schlockmeister himself. He brought him and Eric Freeman back in a scene where they're together, which is a nice little nod to the Silent Night, Deadly Night movies. All in all, I really enjoy Silent Night, Deadly Night. Like I said, it's probably the most well-made movie. It's a movie that I will definitely watch every year. It has the Christmas feel. It has the Christmas feel to the music. Great performances, great kills. The writer claims to have written a lot of this movie to play for laughs, but in my opinion, it plays pretty straight to me. It's an enjoyable holiday horror classic. And this leads us into Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, which picks up a few years later with Billy's little brother Ricky and an insane performance from Eric Freeman. Let's dig in. Now, it's interesting when I start to dive into Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, as weird and bizarre as this movie is, it doesn't even scratch the surface as to the left turn this series takes in the later movies. God, this series is strange. Now, from a production standpoint, Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 has one of the strangest stories of how this movie came to be. Basically, producer Larry Applebaum wanted to make a sequel to the first movie, but he was such a cheap, penny-pinching bastard, he wanted to try to craft some sort of a sequel without even shooting any new footage. He wanted to somehow recut the first movie, maybe change the music, add some narration or some bullshit, and try to make a whole new movie with the same footage. So when Lee Harry was tasked with somehow Frankensteining a sequel out of footage from Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 1, he basically told the studio, listen man, I have to shoot some new footage. We can't just chop up the first movie and create a new movie. I have to write and direct some new footage for this to work. So that's when him and his writing partner quickly whipped up a story about Billy's little brother Ricky going on a rampage himself, casting Eric Freeman, thank God, and creating this wacky movie we all know now as Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. This is a movie that never should have worked. In fact, it probably should have never even been made, but somehow it was, and somehow it became the cult classic that it is, mainly thanks to Eric Freeman's bizarre, unhinged performance as little brother Ricky. For the first approximately 40 to 45 minutes, the movie is basically about 80%, maybe 90% footage from the original film. And they don't just play little clips of the first movie. There's full scenes that run minutes long. It's basically a retelling of the entire first movie. When about the 40 to 45 minute mark kicks in, that's when all the new footage takes place, and that's when we get Eric Freeman's murderous rampage, all the garbage day stuff that happens, and it's actually a really fun little slasher. Really, this movie doesn't have a Christmas feel at all. I mean, with the exception of what you see earlier in the movie from the first movie. In the last 10 minutes, Billy finally dresses up in a Santa Claus suit, and we get a little bit of Santa Claus action, but up until then, it has very little to do with Christmas. We see Ricky as an adult now as he starts going about his life and slowly becoming more and more triggered into the same thing that happened to his older brother and just going on a murderous rampage. There's a really cool umbrella kill as he's working at a restaurant and he runs this guy through with an umbrella and the umbrella opens behind him while it's inside his body. That was a really great kill. There's another great kill where he kills his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend using a car battery. That was pretty clever. Nothing in this movie really makes sense, and most of the time he just seems like the Terminator or something, randomly killing people who don't seem to be really being naughty much. He's just inexplicably having fun. This movie is obviously infamous for the garbage day scene where he just goes on this neighborhood rampage.
Garbage day! Huh? No!
The movie climaxes at the end with him finally having his revenge on Mother Superior, who is played by a different actress and inexplicably has some sort of toxic Avenger bubble deformity burn on her face. They try to explain that away in a little bit by saying she had a stroke. That really doesn't explain why her face is disfigured, but either way, we get this great kill reveal where he's chopped off Mother Superior's head. She moves a little bit, the head rolls off, it's great. And of course you have this stinger at the end when you realize that Ricky's still alive. Listen, this movie is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. Half the movie is footage recycled from the first movie, but something about this movie is just so watchable, mainly pertaining to Eric Freeman. Eric Freeman's performance as Ricky in this movie is just incredible. I could watch him play this character over and over again, and I'm really not sure why he didn't come back for the third movie. Maybe somebody can answer in the comments about why he didn't return for the third movie. So I guess that leads us into Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3, and let's talk about it. In Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3, Ricky Caldwell, the notorious Killer Santa Claus, awakens from a 6-year coma after being kept alive on life support by a slightly crazed doctor experimenting with ESP and other special abilities. Ricky targets a young clairvoyant blind woman named Laura, whom is traveling with her brother Chris and his girlfriend Jerry to their grandmother's house for Christmas Eve. And Ricky decides to go after her, leaving a trail of dead bodies in his wake. When they say trail of dead bodies, a trail of shitty, boring, off-screen kills. This movie is easily the slowest and, in my opinion, hardest to get through in the entire series. We are now moving into the direct-to-video era of the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise. This is one of the more bizarre entries of the franchise, but at least has some continuity to the first and second movies, something that can't be said much for the ones that come after this. This has got to go down in horror history as some of the most untapped potential of a horror icon in a horror movie ever. This movie stars Bill Moseley as Ricky with this insane brain-exposed device. His brain is sloshing around in some sort of solution. His brain is completely exposed, and you have Bill Moseley as Ricky. The problem is he barely says a single word in this movie. He basically says, Laura, like 5 times. He's basically a vegetable in this movie and has no emotion, no action, no comedy. And this is after he played Chop Top. This movie came after Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, so
Hey, lick my plate, you dog dick!
we already know what Bill Moseley can do. And in this movie, he's just like this the whole time and he does nothing. It's such an underutilized Bill Moseley here. There is some interesting continuity, being that we do have Ricky somehow surviving what they called him having half of his head blown off, which is a little bit of an issue considering that we saw him get shot in the first movie. He took body shots, he didn't take a single shot to the head. It's explained that the doctors reconstructed his brain. Alongside Bill Moseley is Samantha Scully, who plays Laura. She gives me big time Jennifer Connelly vibes in this movie in a completely boring performance, but she has a good look. She's very pretty. She's serviceable in the role. And we also have Laura Herring, who plays Jerry, who most of you might recognize from Twin Peaks. And this movie was directed by Monty Hellman, who considers this his best movie, which is bizarre. He is actually the executive producer of Reservoir Dogs. He's produced a lot of movies, actually. This movie is just really, really slow. I kept on just waiting for it to be over. It actually starts off with a really cool premise. It starts off with promise with this doctor who has the Laura character and Ricky character linked and using her psychic abilities to sort of get in the brain of Ricky, and then they can feel each other's thoughts. That's how Ricky knows where to go. Laura's on the way to Grandma's house for Christmas, and he psychopathically, I guess, knows where she is. It's pretty funny seeing him zombie walk and hitchhiking. There's this scene where he's hitchhiking like this with his brain sloshing around in this solution, and some asshole picks him up. Got an exposed brain, he's not talking, he's in a hospital gown barefoot, and this guy still picks him up.
What happened to you, man? You get a hair transplant?
It's weird that you can have an actor like Bill Moseley, incredibly charismatic actor, playing a character that has his brain exposed, sloshing around in some sort of shit, and it's just boring as hell, and it's really hard to get through. There's a side plot line of supposedly one of the detectives or cops from the first movie and the doctor who's conducting these experiments, who is sort of like a Loomis character as they sort of are hot on the trail of Ricky, but it's all very boring and leads to a fairly boring climax. So for Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3, we get an incredibly underutilized Bill Moseley, a movie that has very little Christmas feel, very little atmosphere, very little kills. It's extremely slow. A pretty shitty third film leading into a completely disconnected and unrelated fourth film in the franchise, Silent Night, Deadly Night 4: Initiation. In The Initiation, a reporter investigating the bizarre death of a woman who leapt from a building in flames finds herself mixed up in a cult of witches who are making her a part of their sacrificial ceremony during the Christmas season. So just when you thought this franchise couldn't get any more bizarre or disconnected from the original movie, enter Brian Yuzna, director of Society, Bride of Reanimator, Return of the Living Dead 3, Necronomicon, The Dentist 2, Beyond Reanimator. Brian Yuzna is hands down one of my favorite horror directors. His movies are incredible. This movie is absolutely batshit crazy, but it fits right in with the rest of his filmography if you've seen his other stuff, especially with his direction and the effects work of Screaming Mad George. This movie, admittedly largely incoherent, is truly bizarre in every sense of the word. It really falls in line with a lot of the works of Brian Yuzna, specifically Society, especially with a lot of the effects and the weird body horror scenes towards the end of the movie. This movie has Clint Howard playing this henchman of the witches. Now, I could be wrong, but this is what I found. If you guys know anything about it, please let me know. Sound off in the comments. Part 3 director Monty Hellman actually rejected a script and decided to throw that away and write an entirely new script for his Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3. What was that rejected script ended up being the basis for Part 4. So Brian Yuzna and Woody Keith, aka Zeffie Daniel, reworked this script to become what it was. In '96, when this movie was released in the UK on video, it was actually titled Bugs, not even associated with Silent Night, Deadly Night, which makes sense. This movie has nothing to do with the original movies whatsoever. Now, this movie actually has a hell of a cast. Like I said, Clint Howard, Reggie Bannister is actually in this movie. This is a fantastic Clint Howard movie. If you're a Clint Howard head and you haven't seen this movie, he has a big part in this movie as their bug wrangler, as their henchman. He's plays a truly like kind of a homeless guy. Reggie Bannister plays investigative reporter's boss in the movie, who is played by Neith Hunter. She is absolutely stunning. Now, if I like this movie probably more than I should, it's because of Neith Hunter. She is just unbelievably gorgeous. Puts out an extremely good effort in this movie. She really goes for it in the last half of this movie, and she sort of has to, because as the movie starts getting weirder and weirder, and there's more bugs and more body horror and more disgusting shit, and she really goes for it, and she has to. This movie asks a lot of her, the shit that she has to do. There's this scene where Clint Howard breaks this bug in half and squeezes all this jelly onto her face, and the effects work of Screaming Mad George are absolutely fantastic. He's done a bunch of cool stuff. Most notably, I think his best work was probably in the movie Freaked. He's an amazing special effects artist. He also did The Guyver. That's another good display of his work. And his style is all over this movie with the twisted fingers and the bugs and all the weird body horror effects. It's fantastic. Also Hank, the boyfriend character, if you guys have seen a little movie called Back to the Beach, which was a childhood favorite of mine. The boyfriend, I kept on thinking, where the hell do I know this boyfriend character from? And that's where I remembered him from, the classic Back to the Beach with Pee-wee and Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello. It's a fun little movie.
Okay, Boomer.
But overall, I really, really enjoyed The Initiation. It doesn't have a killer Santa, really nothing to do with Christmas whatsoever, but I found myself really enjoying The Initiation, even though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The story is interesting and bizarre, it's gross, there's a lot of practical effects, a lot of bugs, a lot of Clint Howard, a lot of Screaming Mad George special effects, and it was a great lead into, which is yet another further departure in the series for Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 5, The Toy Maker. Now, when it comes to Part 5, I actually hear a lot of people say that this is the favorite of the direct-to-video era of the Silent Night Deadly series. I'd have to say mine is Part 4, but I really found myself enjoying this one too. It's a little slow to get started, but once it gets going, this movie is a lot of fun. This movie stars Mickey Rooney as a crazed toy maker who creates these bizarre toys that kill people. Maybe I missed it, but I couldn't find any reason behind why he does this. Maybe he just has a good time in it. But the performance from Mickey Rooney as this crazy toy maker, who is called Pedo, by the way, Joe Pedo, and his little protege, his son, his creation, named Pino, very clever there. These two characters in particular really work well together. Mickey Rooney is fucking insane in this movie. It's got to be one of the most left field castings in horror history. I keep on talking about horror history in this video, but it's true. To see Mickey Rooney in a role like this is absolutely insane. And when he rages out and he really goes for it, he is fantastic. I've only seen him in this. I think this is probably the only thing I've ever seen him in. He was a little before my time, but
That was 2 weeks ago. You cannot go on or keep ringing my bell. You disturb me.
but he's amazing in this movie. Fun fact, going back to the very first movie, talking about all the controversy and the protests, he actually wrote a letter. I don't know where he sent the letter to. Maybe it was an open letter in a magazine or something, but he wrote a letter in protest of the first movie, saying the scum who made Silent Night, Deadly Night should be run out of town. Pretty funny that he said that, being that he ends up starring as the villain. Maybe he lost whatever qualm he had.
I protest.
He's fantastic in this movie, as is Brian Bremer, who plays Pino, who is actually still working today. He's been in a bunch of high-profile movies. This bizarre entry into the series was directed by Martin Kitrosser. Although he's only directed 4 films, he's actually a prolific script supervisor who's been a script supervisor on many, 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 many movies that I'm sure all of you have seen, including every single Quentin Tarantino movie. He also served as a writer on films such as Friday the 13th, 3, 4, and 5. He's credited most recently on Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as Martin Cobra Kitrosser. I had a lot of fun with this movie. Like I said, it takes a bit to get going, but once the killer toys start happening, there's a crazy rollerblade kill, which would only happen in the 90s. A great opening kill that sort of reminded me of Phantasm. I think that had to have been a little tribute to Phantasm. And there is a little callback to the 4th movie where a guy gets a toy made by this crazed toy maker that resembles the, worm or whatever the fuck it was from the 4th movie, that actually ends up killing a guy in a car in Part 5, which is pretty good. That was one of the better gore sequences. Screaming Mad George also did the effects for this movie. He's a genius. But overall, a decent cap to the series that had completely gone off the wheels. In no way resembles anything having to do with the first movie, so now that we've reached the end of this thing, we've talked about all the movies, now it's time to rank them. And I gotta tell you, there's a couple of these that I had a really tough time figuring out where to place, but I have my ranking here and we're gonna break it down. We're gonna go from worst to best. Number 5 spot goes to Part 3, Better Watch Out. Guys, I just thought this one was incredibly boring. This movie should have been and could have been maybe the best with Bill Moseley, but the lack of kills, the slow plotting, Part 3 easily is the last in my list. In the number 4 spot is Part 4, Initiation. Now guys, I love Brian Usna. This one was really tough. This one was barely edged out in what is in my number 3 spot, but I still love number 4. I know I'll end up going back and revisiting this one. The special effects are amazing. The lead performance is great, and I did have a lot of fun with this. Clint Howard is great, but ultimately some slow plot elements in this movie is just a little harder to get through, little slower, especially in the beginning of the movie, so it had to take the number 4 spot. So now right smack smack dab in the middle with part 3, I had to go with number 5, The Toy Maker. I really had a good time with this movie, but it didn't quite edge out the 2 original films. But with the performances of Mickey Rooney and his son, his Pinocchio son, the practical effects, the kills, the 90s nature of this movie, I just had a really good time with it. The climax is super weird. So in the number 3 spot is part 5, The Toy Maker. Now we get to the top 2 spots, and this is where I had the most trouble picking my favorites here, because both 1 and 2 are so much fun, obviously for different reasons. Part 1 plays it really straight and is just honestly a really good slasher, and part 2 plays that really good, like so bad it's good, the unhinged performance from Eric Freeman. But ultimately my number 2 spot goes to Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 2. I think if Part 2 would have crafted a wholly original story but still had the performance from Eric Freeman without using and relying so much on the first movie's footage, I think this maybe could have been my favorite in the series. But unfortunately, it retreads a lot of the same aspects of the first one and just doesn't have enough new original content. And obviously, by process of elimination, my number 1 spot has to go to Silent Night, Deadly Night, Part 1. Guys, I think this movie is amazing. As much as the writer says that he sort of wanted this movie to play for laughs, I find this movie to be a genuinely somewhat disturbing slasher movie. The soundtrack, the score is great, the performances are great, the kills are fun, disturbing as we track Billy's entire life from witnessing his parents getting killed to all of the horrific things that happen at the orphanage, Mother Superior. This from beginning to end is just the most well-made film, I feel. I can't imagine this movie being in any other spot other than number 1. So, guys, we made it to the end. Pete lasted on the table the whole time. I'm so proud of him. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for the recap of the entire Silent Night, Deadly Night series. I had a lot of fun talking about them. As always, look forward to so much fun shit that's going to be going on in the next year. A whole nother channel that I'm starting. The second channel is going to be a lot of fun talking about all the B movies and physical media and the collecting aspects of my content. So I can't wait to see you guys in the next year. I ain't stopping anytime soon, so we're going to push forward. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay weird. Remember to always be yourself, and I will see you in the next one. Merry Christmas. Naughty. Punish.